Hello, women who lead and sell. Today our guest is someone who was the counterpart to Theresa May, has been involved in massive projects for the NHS, major drugs companies, including quite a lot of work around COVID and communication. She talks to us about something that we all need, but we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about.
Rachel Cashman is who we're speaking to today, and she takes us through the foundations of personal psychological safety and then speaks to us around what it looks like to have psychological safety in your team, in your family. So it's so important for female founders because we're juggling it all. We think we have to be it all, and we need somebody to bring us back into our center to really lead from that central place. It's a brilliant interview.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe, like, or share this with 3 female founders that you know.
Hi, Rachel. Welcome
Hi,
to
Rachel.
Women Who Lead and Sell. It is so good to have you on. I'm going to jump in with the most important question, the thing that's most important to you, which is psychological safety. Will you take us through your explanation of what psychological safety is, and remembering our listeners may not understand it, so keep it real foundation level.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for having me join you. I love meeting new people and, having conversations, particularly about psychological safety. And, for your listeners and viewers, it is the hottest day of the year so far. So you've got me at my sweatiest best today. Just to make that really, really clear, my hair is really frizzy. So psychological safety, that's a good leap into it actually, which is it can be about how do we as leaders be comfortable with our vulnerability. And it's about how we set the conditions, how we set the tone, how we create the conditions for people to be able to ask questions, to be curious, to challenge the status quo, to take a risk, to innovate, without the sense that doing so will mean they will either be harmed, be mocked, be punished. And also psychological safety, it happens within people, it happens between people, and it can happen amongst people. So what I mean by that is, as an individual, psychological safety is not taught. I'm not going to come into your organization and teach you how to do psychological safety. We'll tick a box, woohoo, CPD done. It's not how it works. It's felt and it's experienced. So I may come into your organization as a member of staff with a really poor experience of psychological safety, and that will stay with me till I experience something new. It can also happen between people. So I may have a great relationship with every single person on my team one-to-one, but then something may change about the dynamics in a room when we're there together as a team. And that might be the context where I'm not able to contribute. So it's actually more layered, if you like, than we often think that it could be. And it's also, I'll get off my soapbox in a minute, I promise, but it's also often misinterpreted. So psychological safety is not a corporate cuddle. I'm not here to put my arm around you. It's about that's important. Well-being is important, and a lack of psychological safety will make people more anxious and therefore need more well-being support or occupational health support maybe. But psychological safety is about performance. It's about accountability, and it's about performance, and it's about harnessing the difference that people have, that collective intelligence in pursuit of really high performance.
Amazing.
Oh, nailed it. Always stay on the soapbox. Frizzy hair and all. Literally, I don't know how long that was, but if somebody could hear that in that way and then bringing it back around to we want to get stuff done. We want to live our best lives. We want to perform, and it's not about that corporate cuddle. This is really about that inner world. I love that. Thank you.
But do you know what happens?
Yeah,
Sorry,
go.
I cut across you. But do you know what happens
please.
is that so much. So psychological safety has been around. It's been around in the kind of management lexicon for about 30 years, and it's been researched for the last 30 years. And I'm very fortunate to have worked with and trained with Amy Edmondson at Harvard, who is one of the most prominent kind of academics on psychological safety. But it's become super sexy as a thing that kind of leaders talk about in the last couple of years in particular. But it's also become something that is really misunderstood and misinterpreted. So people will say, well, we need to get the psychological safety right. Here's a well-being program. That's not quite right. Or people will say, you can't performance manage me. That's going to damage my psychological safety. And they misinterpret being held to account with exacting standards for doing work for an attack on psychological safety. So it does take a bit of work to create the conditions well.
Thank you for driving that home.
How would an SME do that then? What are the foundational pointers? What should we be looking for?
Yeah. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we think in small businesses in particular, and I think women leaders as well will often have, and I've had this, I've had my business for 10 years, and I felt this where you kind of want to maybe please all of your potential customers, potential investors, your stakeholders, or you might want to be so wedded to your intent that you might create conditions that are a bit more adversarial. What we're talking about here is how do we create the environment between people to have a robust and rigorous conversation with a divergence of view and counterfactual, always in pursuit of the end goal, always in pursuit of the purpose. So point number one for SMEs or any company, but particularly for SMEs, is be really clear about your purpose. Not just your purpose of your business, but the purpose of the dialogue that you're entering into, because psychological safety is a dialogic process.
Yes.
So be clear about your purpose. And then there'll be a couple of other areas that I would always say to kind of touch upon. One is reflect upon how do you give and seek help. So how do you ask for help and how do you receive help if it's offered? The second area is how do you align risk and mistake making and blame? What is your own relationship with all of those things? Because as a woman who is leading their own business, it can be hard to ask for help. You might be fearful about taking risks, but you might not want to admit certain things because you've been burnt in the past. All of this stuff is layered. So an element of psychological safety is about understanding our personal and then the broader organizational relationship with risk and mistake making and blame. The next area is around those open conversations. So what's the criteria by which you would have a really transparent and rigorous conversation? What are the mechanics around that? So how do you set up your conversations? So to come on this podcast, you sent me a beautiful, gorgeous, and really lovely designed brief, right? That is creating a psychologically safe conversation because I've walked into this virtual room knowing what's expected of me. And we can start off in a place that is really open and really transparent. And then the last area is about equality and inclusion. And what I'd say about that is it's very easy for us to go, well, what we mean by that is, is it a protected characteristic? Is it about women? Is it about race? Is it about this? In psychological safety terms, equality, diversity, and inclusion is not just about those things. It's actually about power. It's about dynamics. So think about this as a woman who's running a small business. What forums are you going into, whether it's a business networking event, whether it's a potential investor event, whether it's you're looking for your first business mentor? What's the power dynamic between you and that person? How safe do you feel to be vulnerable and open with that person and have those transparent conversations?
Oh, it's so good. Like I am
Amazing.
filling up, I'm bursting and I don't know what to do with myself. I'm literally like talking myself to sit your bum cheeks on the chair. Don't be too excited.
The thing is, it is sexy, right? Like it is. So when I say it's been like sexified over the last few years, because it's meaningful because it's about the dynamics of people. And there's nothing as like bonkers as people, right? And we all come to things from completely different perspectives. Like I was born in a traveling circus. I didn't live in a house made of bricks for years because my mum couldn't afford one. I have that gypsy chip on my shoulder, right? And I've got an elephant tattooed on my ankle. And part of what I do is about bringing the elephants into the room with my clients, right? One of the things clients say about me is, I've never been so comfortable talking about the uncomfortable. And I've been known to whip my ankle out and stick it on the table and say, I'm literally bringing the elephant into the room now. Like, what are we not talking about?
So good.
And so, it is, because it's about people and it is about context, and every single person's context will be the same. We all run businesses. We could be running identikit products, but our businesses would be radically different because we are different people. Yeah. The same is true in kind of mega companies. So it's always so rich to work with people.
So is. Like, do you have a burning question?
I do, but I'm going to ask it later.
Okay,
Go.
good. Okay, so I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay really as this founder doer. Small team, scaling. It doesn't really matter about revenue, but like you're winning business, but then are you managing it really well enough to keep it, retain it, build the clients, and you're still out there delivering and pitching and selling for the rest, right? That's the world of it. How do I really begin when, as a founder, I have maybe a team of five to eight, and I know that my nurturing side, my supportive side, my wanting everyone to feel safe and motivated, and I'm doing all this, you can kind of get the world of it. How do I kind of evaluate myself? What kind of questions can I ask myself to remind myself that actually my role is as a leader to drive this business forward, and it's not to be a nurturer, because that's the conversations that we're in all the time. Women get confused. I got confused, and I still do. That's why I need to be educated and strengthened all the time. It's like, yeah, what do I ask myself? Like, really, like, talk to me as a founder. Like, what do I need to do?
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm smiling because the call I had before doing this podcast was with my PA. And so I deliberately have a model where I don't have staff. I've got associates and I've got a PA. She's actually a VA, but she happens to live around the corner. So she's become a PA, and she's brilliant. But we meet every week, and we have quite a robust set of conversations about the success of the business, almost treating the business like it's an identity in and of itself. Right. Yes. So I might be Rachel, the founder. I might be the fearless facilitator. And I am perfectly healthy because I've been to the gym, but I need to look at the health of the business. And I am seeking, this morning it was her, it might be another day, it might be, somebody else that I work with, but this morning it was her assessment of the health of the business from an operations and administrative perspective. That is something radically different from me going, and her name's Jo, and I do love her, but that is something radically different from me going, but Jo, I love you. Like, Jo knows that, and she won't mind me saying this, right? But Jo knows that the market is difficult, right, for small businesses at the moment. I think the market is harder than maybe big industry and governments realise at the moment for a lot of small businesses. And so we will have a conversation that, she will say, if you need to let me go at any point in the scaling or the pivoting or the thing, that's the conversation that we have, because we do what's right for the business. So that would be my first piece of advice there, is really get into that frame. You're not there to rescue the people that you work. That kind of rescuer triangle piece. You are there to sustain a healthy business.
Yeah.
So it's almost separating out the relationship. And then you can start to ask those questions, those psychological safety questions about the health of your business.
Great.
So how are we having open conversations about the health of this business and what needs to change?
Fab.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're interested in growing your business. And if so, we have a 6-week program where you will get the clarity that you need to come up with that strategic plan that you need to get to that next level.
Yeah, if you want straightforward, no fluff, like hands-on, real personal experience that's going to get you to the next level of your self-leadership and to land the next high-value client, come and find out more. Keep following the podcast, listen to what we're doing, and also come over to LinkedIn to find out the details. Okay, my next question, they're going to come thick and fast, I think.
Oh, good.
Who is responsible for psychological safety in a team?
Everyone. So it's a common misnomer that it's only the leader. And I hear this quite a lot. Well, whoever the top dog is, right? Whether it's the chief executive or the team leader, or in a small business, it might be the founder, right? Yeah. Well, it's up to them. It's, they're not doing it, so everything's wrong. And there's two things I'd say about that. One is we are all leaders. We are all leaders in life, right? If you connect with other people and you have agency, then you have a responsibility to apply that agency well. And I would contest that applying psychological safety mixed with other things, like it's not the be all and end all, but psychological safety mixed with other things is really, really important. Founders of organizations and team leaders have a responsibility to set the tone. But if they don't, they can't, or they choose not to, that is not license for everybody else to go, do you know what, I won't bother. Because, you know, when you get up in the morning, think about the sort of person you want to be. Think about the agency that you have and how you can apply it. So if you're working in a really small team, you're in a startup business, as you said, 3 or 4 members of staff and one founder, the founder is not deploying psych safety at all. There's nothing to say that those other members of staff in their interactions with each other can't look at some of those tactics, some of the questions, the curiosity, the empathy, the humility. They're the values of psychological safety. One of the things that I constantly ask my clients to do when they work with me is we do work around designated dissent and counterfactual. So whatever it is that we're working on, whatever it is that we're talking about, I will always say, who is going to be the designated dissenter in the room? Who is the person whose job it is today to offer the counterfactual to whatever we are agreeing and deciding, so that we can be confident that we have had a 360 discussion about something. We've thought of lots of different perspectives, because that's about harnessing collective intelligence. That's not about saying, we disagree, even though it's good to disagree. That's us about harnessing that collective intelligence. If you're in a tiny micro business and the founder's not interested in doing that, that doesn't mean that you can't do that with your colleagues. So it's not something that can solely be set by the leader, but it's really helpful if it is.
Wow, just wonderful. And what kind of resistance have you noticed in a team, any size team, when the tone isn't set by leadership and somebody in the team or a group of people want to bring in some of these methods of psychological safety and the other kind of conditions? Have you noticed there can be any resistance when, let me try and think of the words, when it's not set by leadership, but somebody wants to kind of advocate for something better? Have you noticed any resistances? I'm really interested in your deeply experienced view on that.
So I've seen all kinds, right? So I operate, if you imagine a continuum of let's create the conditions for kind of improvement at one end of the continuum. And then at the other end is everything's gone wrong and we're in a real mess and everybody hates each other. We've got employment tribunals, and I do a lot of work in the healthcare sector. So quite often there'll be harm has been caused in, an incident along the way, and everything in between. So I get lots of different kind of clash points. So I've seen it where you've got groups. I've one brilliant one quite recently, actually, where the leader of the team really wanted the team to step up, right? To stop being the children in that parent-child relationship. That she wanted them to step into their agency, and she was trying her hardest. But they had that kind of learned helplessness for such a long time, purely by the fact she'd been there an awfully long time. So they just got used to that individual being there and having all the answers. To be honest, they'd stopped trying. So the work that we did there was about liberating them to kind of, remove the shackles. And some of that was about removing her, not from her job, but from her presence, like not being present at some of the meetings where they would have to think for themselves, but then equally making sure that she didn't then follow up and reprimand or, alter, let them fail, let them, do these mistakes, let them go do it their way to learn. There are other clients I've had where, there's some that I've had which are brilliant, where you get like a team and the team leader will just have such a opposing view on who each other is and what they are. So I get quite a lot of that where the team will be like, this person is like a school mistress and we feel like we're being treated like children. And actually when you speak to the leader, they're like, but there's so much risk in what they're doing that they're not seeing the risks. So how do you get that clashing? And then you get the kind of uprising, as you've just described, which is those teams who want to drive the change faster than the organisation is ready for, irrespective of size of the organisation.
Yes.
And what I then we try and do with them is say, right, let's play. Let's have, let's do some behavioural experimentation. Let's play. What is the boundaries of your control? There was a really big pharmaceutical company I worked with once, and they had a set of values. And I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, but one of the values was unbossed. And they've since done a lot of work on that because it landed differently with people, right? What they intended from being unbossed was you have a freedom to innovate. You have a freedom to try things. There'll be boundaries around that, but you've got a freedom to explore. What actually happened in some parts, but not all, was some people interpreted that as, I don't need to adhere to the hierarchy in this organisation, so I could just do what I want. Yeah. And then you get a clash. So what you've got to try and do is kind of manage and mitigate some of that. So thinking about behavioural experimentation for the people on the uprising is let's think about how do we proof of concept this? How do we try something different? How do we put some boundaries around it? How do we build in the capacity to review and learn? And demonstrate the evidence and then reflect and change. So it's a kind of a classic learning cycle. But to do that well, you've got to create the conditions to have the conversation about whether it's working or not.
Yes.
And sometimes if you're part of the uprising, you don't want to admit that it's not worked because then you feel like, oh, but we want it to work so much.
Yeah, totally get it. Okay, and I think my questions there just, again, they covered the founder doer to the doer leader, the founder leader.
Yeah.
And the types of, because you're wearing so many hats. And then I didn't know about psychological safety when I ran my first business that scaled. I didn't. And I had all of the issues that you're talking about. And it's literally why I burnt out. It's like you can't manage it all. It's just all got too big and all the issues. So it's almost like it's like a separate curriculum really for founders to really understand. Yeah. Even though it's quite complex what you're talking about, there are some checklists and, there's some behavioural things you can build in, which are like just transformational. Aliya?
Yeah, so speaking on that, I mean, how would I create psychological safety for myself, for example? How would I be going into work and going, well, I should be thinking about this, or I should be communicating this? Where would I start?
3 things, I would say, and these are the kind of core values that will help. Even if you're not feeling it so much internally, it will help others around you get a sense of it. So that is, how are you applying curiosity, humility, and empathy? So how are you being, and I would say curiosity is one of the founding principles. Like that's the one that's really important for me. So how are you being curious about other people? Even if you're not that bothered, right? Even if you are thinking, I'm not that interested, what are the questions, the open questions that you can ask? So I worked with one organisation, and the leader of this group, they didn't feel very safe with this person because the person, even though it was a small open plan office, they didn't speak to them. They just came in and then sat at the desk in the corner every day. When I worked with the leader, she was terrified at what they might say because all problems end up with the founder, right? And inside her head, it was all getting too much. Yeah. So we literally did some work with her about how she would have the confidence to say hello and ask some curious questions 3 times a week. And that started the basis of transforming that relationship. So what does curiosity mean for you? The second thing is humility. So think about your story in the workplace. So what makes you who you are today? Why are you there? And what is the humility thread that runs through that story? What is the thing where you've maybe made mistakes or you've recognized that you're not fallible? You've just talked about you burning out. I burnt out when I worked at NHS England. I was doing a major infrastructure program. I live in Brighton. I went to London on a Monday morning thinking I was going to come home that night. I came home 21 days later. I was going to M&S every morning to buy new knickers, like it was insane. And then I got a text message from my then boyfriend saying I would rather go out with a human being than a voicemail. I mean, that was hard. That was the end of that relationship. But it was also the end of me. I ended up on the floor of the toilet at 3 a.m. in the lawyer's office thinking, I can't do this anymore, right? Yeah. So I know what that feels like. And I have told you that story. I tell lots of clients that story. I'm not ashamed of that story because it's part of what has made me interested in and go on to train in psychological safety now. So think about your own humility and your own fallibility, and how do you talk about it and describe it to others without getting into a place that is uncomfortable and vulnerable for you. Because so it's that very kind of cautious, gradual, write your script, tell your story. And then the empathy is, what are you going to display? How do you show empathy to others? Do you use kind of techniques like kind of radical candor, Kim Scott's work around, caring compassionately and giving direct feedback? Or do you have another kind of turn of phrase or tactic or way that you show empathy? And I always liken it to a dimmer switch, a light dimmer switch. We're not asking you to put all three up to full disco blazing all at once, but just think about those three values and think about what could you do really well with one of them or a little bit with each. And slowly but surely, by deploying that, it'll become more comfortable. And over time, you will see that the relationships gradually change.
Building the muscle.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like going to the gym, right? And people will then respond to you differently. So the more that they see your fallibility or your willingness to talk about things that have maybe not been so great for you, the more they'll be willing to open up to you, and vice versa. And suddenly that starts to become that kind of that piece where they can have a far more open conversation.
Where have you seen the work that you do, or this sort of freedom that people feel once they feel psychologically safe? Where have you seen that impact in a very real sense in a business? Have you got any examples you can tell us about that?
Yeah. So, and I think this is with a bigger company, but I think it's equally applicable to small businesses, is I was working in a science company and we managed to get the timeline from ideation of a new idea to execution and review of that idea down from 18 months to 6 months. Now, the timescales will probably be different in a smaller company because you're more agile anyway. So it might be from, 18 weeks to 6 weeks or, but it was going through a structured process of thinking about how do we align risk? How do we align our attitude to risk? And really importantly, when do we call time? How do we initiate a conversation that says we're going to leap in and we're going to take a risk here? And we're all agreed on what the tolerance is. So you've got the psychological safety to have that conversation because our risk tolerance might be misaligned. So how do we agree it? How do we jump in, all knowing the gateway with which we're going to step back and call time and pull it? No prevarication. We're going to pull straight away and then reframe and then reinvest or rethink or redo. And when that happens, it's quite glorious because even though it can feel scary either to take the risk, often for people it can feel scarier to pull something once they've gone in. But once they've done it once and the relief is that was the best decision, the kind of richness of the conversation about understanding the risk and the bravery to just say, time out, we're ending this, is really, really powerful. And it makes people feel more willing and more assured actually to take risk again in the future.
What I'm getting from you, Rachel, is really interesting, is if you were a stick of rock, we were to cut you open, it would say psychological safety, or us. And you talked about travelling circus, and I'm not letting that go by. No, sorry, but no. Just take me from travelling circus to psychological safety, doing massive projects for the NHS. Can you just tell me something about that? Because I want to know, what is that there?
Yeah.
Tell me about your life.
It's so funny because I hadn't until really recently, I've had my business 10 years. It was only in the last couple of years I've been honest publicly about the old circus thing because I thought it might, before I was always a bit reticent. And then my old mate, who'd be brilliant for this podcast, by the way. She had worked in the corporate world forever and ever and ever, big retail, consumer retail, and has now got just set up her own storytelling business. And I went for a drink with her and she ended up saying, can I practice some of my stuff on you that I'm going to put into the business? And then she was like, you've got to talk about the circus. So I was born in Ashton Circus in Australia. My mum was a teacher of the kids whose parents were clowns and acrobats. My dad was a horse trainer. All my baby photos of me with the circus animals. I was looked after by an elephant called Abu that you can look up on the internet. Abu also killed 6 people, but he used to love me. It's all a bit like weird, to be honest. My mum and dad split up. My mum came back to Britain. Fairly normal childhood-ish in the sense that, you know, it was the 80s. Mum was a single parent. We had no money. Like I can remember when she had £9 in her bank account. So that's made me always, I think that has stuck with me, you know, that you've got a kind of, that survival instinct has properly stuck with me. I got expelled from school at 16 because I hadn't been going for a few years. I turned up on my equivalent of GCSE day, did the exams, and then worked in a nursing home because I got expelled from school. So worked in a nursing home in care of the elderly with Alzheimer's. And it was like an immediate transformation. I went from never going to school to doing 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. And I absolutely loved that job. And one of the first things that I saw was the mistreatment of some of those staff by a very senior nurse in that organisation. And because I had a bit of the swagger, because I'd had older boyfriends, I'd been hanging out with football casuals, I'd been like, I'd been a bit of a rogue. So I still had my kind of street swagger about me. I was like, that's not happening. And what am I going to do about it? And I spoke to a brilliant, oh my God, he was so good, this senior nurse called Peter. I've never forgotten him. And I just said, look, I do night shifts here and I do, and I'm not happy. This is not right. Like if this was my granny, I would not be happy at all. And we reported it and we got the senior nurse dealt with and we changed the practice in that nursing home. I was 16 years old at the time and full of the kind of cockiness, I guess, just had overtaken. But now I look back and say that was really pretty profound for me. That was kind of no compromise. And it's funny because I then went on to, through various, I've had all kinds of jobs, but through various and spurious routes, I worked in a secure unit for methadone detox in Edinburgh while I was at college doing community work, and then was meant to go to university to do social work and never did because I got caught up in politics and I was the vice president of the National Union of Students. I was an FE student but was elected vice president for the whole of the NUS and including the universities. And my publicity material was Cashman, no compromise. Which kind of really spoke back to that. I'm better at compromising these days. And then I worked from there, I kind of did a traditional route. I worked in Parliament and then I worked for the Labour Party. I was one of the youngest ever people to have the role of National Women's Officer of the Labour Party. Don't want to get party political here, but just kind of, in terms of my exposure to things in and out of 10 Downing Street during the Blair years, working with senior politicians at a really young age. My opposition person in the Conservative Party when I was National Women's Officer at the Labour Party was Theresa May, who obviously then went on to be PM. She was an MP at that point. But, you're negotiating, you're having conversations with these people. So I've always had a sense of gravitas alongside that kind of swagger that's never left. And it's then how do you deploy it in the right reason? So I'm not really fazed by anything, but one of my core values is about justice and about integrity and about authenticity, but also about agility. And, how are you able to adapt and apply to the situation that you're in? And from my political work, I went into teaching trade unions and I represented teachers in terms of negotiating pay and conditions. And then I needed to earn some money, quite frankly, because I wanted to buy a house. So I went to the trade body that represented the British pharmaceutical industry, so the global industry, but their interests in the UK. Then I worked for a pharma company. And then this is something I'm super proud of. I was working for Pfizer at the time, a big American corporate company. And the Department of Health and the UK government wanted somebody to come in and work on behalf of the interests of the whole sector. And I was nominated by all of the companies and they signed a contract that every single company, knowing that I was still paid by Pfizer, and they would share all of their commercial data with me, all of their research data. And that, for me, I tell that story because that is about the trust I know I can build with people. So when I go into organisations, whether they're one person or 10,000 people, I'm a pretty fast sponge. I can kind of suck up what's going on really quickly and then go, right, what are the conditions that are making this way? And who's playing in what space, and what do we need to do to try and bring people together or push them apart? Or, you know, how are we gonna work this so that we get an outcome that is both in service of the organization, but respectful to the people?
Quite a challenge, quite a juggle. Because you sometimes see that as either or.
Yeah, but I love it. I love that. It's like a jigsaw, I think. And that just because you've got to, you can still be respectful to the people and to their interests without giving them what they want, and giving them bad news, sometimes letting them go, sometimes managing them out. And that can be true of a founder business with one or two people you recognize. Might be an associate, might be an investor, might be a mentor, it might be somebody that you brought in to help you. And I've done that in my own business, right? Like I have moved people out of my business where I thought they're not serving me well. I won't say who on this podcast, but the last couple of years I've done that, where there was somebody that I brought in to work with me on my business that was just too safe. They weren't pushing me to be risky enough. And if I really want to scale, and, when we met before recording this podcast, I talked to you about, I've had some real challenges in the last few years that have prevented me from scaling at the speed I want to. I had some challenges at home in my family life, but my mother also died. She was in Edinburgh. I'm in Brighton. I had a year of commuting in just post the pandemic, of commuting between the two, which, it's just, if anybody's been through that, it's hard, right? So it's like scaling the business went on the shelf for, a year, and then the grief hit. And I look back now and I think, God, my clients were really good to me in that phase of, what was going on. But now I've come through that personal stuff and can focus on the business again. I looked at some of the things I was doing and some of the people I'd surrounded myself with, and I'm just like, they're too safe. They're not really giving that kind of stick a rock that, one of my strap lines is, where courage meets culture. And I will be the person that comes both with, the courage carrot and the courage stick, and let's really go for it. And so I've had to think about who I want in and around my tight little unit. It's one of the reasons I love my VA. She's great, Jo. She won't mind me saying this, right? But if you were to meet her, you would think that she's like very thoughtful and considered, which she is. She's also a demon at organising and spreadsheets and all the stuff that I don't like doing. And she is. And people will sometimes say, why do you have Jo so tight, right? So there's somebody that I have invested myself in and my time in. Because when everybody else is not there, Jo's the one that will actually push me to take the biggest risks. But nobody else will see it, because to the world, she's very reserved and thoughtful and kind of contained. But in those more private conversations, she's the one that goes, you can do that, just go. And the reason I tell you that story is because as much as psychological safety is layered, you and I know people are layered, right? And what you see isn't always what you're going to get. So having that level of discernment and scrutiny is so important. Discernment, I feel like that's a word I've used so often. In fact, I texted a lawyer that I do quite a lot of work with the other day and said, I'm just telling you this as somebody who's encouraging you to be more discerning. He was like, I'm a lawyer, that's my job. I was like, just in case you're not discerning enough, because people do not apply the critical thinking enough to assess, can I go for it? Should I step back from it? Should I embrace it? What do I do?
Personal branding, social media, getting out there, visibility. It can feel very exposing. It can feel very unsafe. What would you say to a lot of female founders? And we're doing the same, right? I've had people say to me, where are you visible, Aliya? And I realized I'm quite invisible in many ways. Where's the psychological conversation there, the safety conversation there? What should we be saying, doing, putting in place so that we can still be authentic and out there and visible, but feel safe? How are you finding that?
So I hate it all, right? Give me a room with 10,000 people and a microphone and I'm there all day. I absolutely love public speaking. I've been doing it since I was really young. But the kind of, doing a video on my phone to put on my LinkedIn profile, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. So you've got to be authentic, I think. So the first conversation to have with yourself is, who do you want? What version of you do you want to show up? And it comes back to that dimmer switch bit. Like, what I can't really stand is, it's a bit like bridal makeup, right? So, when people get married and they walk down the aisle and the guests are like, who's she? Because the hair is like something that they've never, ever worn in their whole life. Yeah. The makeup is like 27 inches thick, thicker than you need for the photos. And it's a look that you've never seen them wear shocking pink makeup that some random bridal makeup artist has told them to. Now, for me, I sometimes look at that and I'm like, but that's not who you are. Like, on your wedding makeup, in my view, this is a personal opinion, what you want it to do is to accentuate the bits of yourself that you love and that you're confident in, and the bits of you who make you who you are. And so that's the kind of rule that I set myself for LinkedIn and Instagram. I have them quite separate, actually. So my LinkedIn is Fearless Facilitator. I mean, anyone can access them all, but I'm very clear about the content I put on LinkedIn is Fearless Facilitator. Instagram, you're going to be dead bored if you're looking for me for work stuff, because it's all about my running club and my dog. You'll get loads of footage of my dog if you come on Instagram. And then Twitter's where I'm more, X is where I'm more opinionated about various things. Like, that's just my personal opinions. Follow if you want, don't follow if you want. Blue sky, I can't be bothered with. So I curate in that kind of way. That's how I curate things. So I'm very thoughtful. And because LinkedIn is the Fearless Facilitator space, my the brand came from a client. So I was facilitating with an executive team, and the chief executive had said that thing, oh, it's dead comfy dealing with the most difficult stuff. My ankle had been on the table about the elephant and all that stuff. And he said, you really are a fearless facilitator because nobody else has gone there. And I love a bit of alliteration. I thought, right, I'm trademarking that tonight. Yeah. And that is literally how it happened. And then I've had to hang the rest of my brand off it, right? So I'm thoughtful about how I curate myself across those three platforms. I've not got it right yet. I really, really haven't. So I did a post the other day where I compared myself, right, to Princess Diana in 1982. It's had so much traction on LinkedIn compared to stuff where I'm saying something really serious about the government defence strategy that I actually know loads about. But me going, oh, look, when I'm in my shorts and my T-shirt, in my head, I'm Princess Diana coming at the Chelsea Harbour Club in the 80s. But actually my own podcast partner said to me that I looked mental. So, and LinkedIn's loved that. So I have no real idea what the algorithms are doing. But I think injecting a bit of your personality and it's that authentic, how can you accentuate who you are rather than trying to be, so if you're really boring as a person, right? And you're really, not boring, but just, you're really rigid and what you're comfortable in is structure, then be that and be unashamedly that on your LinkedIn post. Because if you're something on LinkedIn and then you rock up with a client and you're something different, somebody said to me, sorry, I'm on another tangent, but I had a meeting on Friday. And somebody said to me, oh, you're far more pragmatic than I thought you were going to be. I was like, what? And they said, oh, you're far more pragmatic than I thought. I had this, what did he say? I had this vision you might be a bit druid and a bit tree hugger. And I was like, that is, nothing could be further from the truth, right, than a druid tree hugger. That is so not me. Where's that come from? And he was like, your website. So I immediately went, get on my website. If there's any druid, get it. Because it's just, I'm fine. If you want to be a druid, but I'm not a druid. Yeah. And then he was like, oh, you're from Brighton. He was like, that was my Brighton thing. Brighton's really relaxed. Everybody's welcome. He said, that was my own bias, hearing about Brighton. And I think, well, should I say near Gatwick on my website so people don't think I'm Druids? And I had this whole conversation with myself.
Near Gatwick. I love it.
So good. I think I've been aware of my facial expressions. I'm just like listening, and then I was crying at one point. I'm trying to like wipe my eyes. I'm like, so I would like to inquire about trust, because that's what has kept coming to me as you're speaking. And Joe, isn't it your VAPA?
Yeah.
All hail to the most amazing online business managers, VAs, PAs around the world.
We love them.
Oh my God, like life is like, it cannot happen without them. So hi, Joe. Describe what trust feels like for you when you know you have trust.
So my husband would say I'm exacting. So my husband would say you are cynical, exacting, and trust no one. So he comes at life from a period. So my husband, just to give you a bit of context, right, is, he likes, so I go to the football with my stepson every week, give me a bit of football, traveling football fans. I love it. My husband sits at home and will read literature, and he's in a very ancient Latin choir. Do you know what I mean? Like, we couldn't be more different, but we've got the same values. But he would say he's very glass half full. His first wife died when the kids were young. So he's kind of got that life experience where he's like way more initially trusting, where he's like, oh my God, you're quite miserable because it has to be earned with me. I don't give it straight away. That discerning thing that I talked about before. And I hate the phrase lean into, but I do lean into that. Like, I've stopped trying to pretend that I'm something I'm not when it comes to trust, right? So I'll be a lot more upfront now that says, look, it might not work out between us in a business relationship or even in a client relationship. Like, it might not work. We might find we're not the right fit. And I would much rather have an honest conversation about that than me pretend to be something I'm not. So you are checking me out and I am also checking you out. So that's one first thing about trust for me. When I managed teams, before I had my business, and I managed a huge team when I worked in the NHS, and I had like sort of 15 major projects at one point going on at the same time. So it was impossible to be on top of everything. And I always used to say to them, you're brilliant at what you do. You're in my team for a reason. I do not want surprises. So there is nothing we cannot fix as long as I know about it. And then you get to the question of how do you alert somebody? So I'm very clear about the language I use. So, I don't need to be across everything all the time, but you have to, so with Joe now, we'll set some language around. If you use this phrase, a bit like a safety phrase, right?
Yeah.
If you use this phrase, I know I've got to come back to that now. I can't be facilitating with a group, with a client somewhere, and see the WhatsApp message and go, I'll deal with it tomorrow when I'm back in Brighton. If that phrase is there, it means it's now.
Yep.
And urgent doesn't cut it, actually, or important doesn't cut it because everybody uses them. So what am I getting at here? There's something about recognizing what your experience of trust is and what it means and what it brings to it, creating the vocabulary around it.
Yeah.
And then, to completely contradict everything I've just said, there are also some times where, particularly when you're trying to either win work or you're trying to get an associate, right, that you'll just meet somebody and you'll go, boom, that feels, that like thing you're feeling, a bit like a first date.
Absolutely.
And you go, boom.
Yeah.
And when that happens for me, I have to that's when I contain it, because as much as I am discerning, I'm also like an old romantic, right? I'll be like, oh, isn't this marvellous? Da, da, da. And then I have to get that out of my system and go, get your discerning lens back on, just to sense check. So I would say trust for me is something that's really incremental. It's got to be around a shared vocabulary, and it has to be earned. And it's tested. It will always be tested, particularly in small businesses for founders where it can be really rubbish being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It could be really hard, right? There could be moments where it feels really lonely. It can be if you expected that big contract that you knew was going to land you for the next 9 months, and for whatever reason, the money's been pulled, or they can't honour it, or they need to put it back 6 weeks. And it's fine because you're going to get the work, but that 6 weeks means a lot because your cash flow for that month, there's a whole set of things, there's stuff that goes on in an entrepreneurial journey. The people who don't bail, right? The people who are there, and they don't have to be delivering in those moments. They don't have to be getting you out of the situation you're in. But the people who are real in those moments are the people that I will feel more trusting of, as opposed to the people that somehow disappear. So that's the other thing for me, is I don't hold a grudge. I'm one of those people, I'll be really annoyed in the moment. I'll go, and then it's gone and it's done. But I never forget. And I'm really clear about that. I never forget. So you will be in my orbit. I will never forget. And I will think about, and that will play into my judgment about who and what I work. So I've walked away from big contracts before that would have seen my business absolutely sorted.
Yeah.
And my husband, because we have a mortgage to pay, will go, I can't believe you've done that. And I'm like, but I will not do this. So I've been midway through a contract before and I've walked out midway through, because in that particular one, it was a healthcare contract and there was something quite serious going on, and the leaders of the organisation were not prepared to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So I exited that with a full audit trail of what I'd seen and heard, and it did all get found out later on and subsequently investigated externally. But, I exited it because they weren't prepared to do their bits in that. And I've been approached before by people who are willing to invest in me and give me a significant amount of money to help me grow the business. And then I've done my due diligence and just thought, nah, doesn't really work for me, actually. And therefore the money isn't going to be the be all. And I'm not sure I can trust you in this relationship. Yeah. So I will always preserve.
Thank you. Thank you for laying that out piece by piece. I've had so many women's stories from the last month. And I want to presence this. So women who lead. In fact, when we first started talking about what we could do together, like we're both in kind of grassroots social leadership as well as business growth, and there's all kinds of, intersections in around that. I mean, your brain, my brain, your brain, smudge them together, right? There's so many things you could do. But women
maybe we should do that. We should do.
We will definitely be schmozzling.
We will.
And I love what you said about that excited, because I definitely had that with you. And I'm like, I've also learned to sit my ass back in the chair and be like, she's there, and let's just observe and absorb who she is. And then where am I? Lots of codependency recovery for 15 years. So I'm like, I'm over here and I'm learning. And same with Aliya and I. Let me get to my point, right? You laid that out, and my question was around trust. But the important thing is women who lead, right? You are leading. And if we're going to transform industries, not from an ego place, but bring systemic change or systemic improvement, systemic relief on a global, on a big scale. Like I'm only one person. Teaming up with other professionals that align is my path to hope. Basically, it's like that's my life's work. Yeah. But women who lead is so important. Now, in my world, people come to me because of the sales leadership and the stabilizing effect that I bring, and we're going for that rather than all these little itty bitty things, right? But it's so difficult sometimes to get a woman to say stop. We're not actually looking at the pipeline right now. We're looking at what you're saying yes to, what you're saying no to, what you're willing to put your name to. I mean, most of the women I attract are very impact driven. They already have the integrity piece sorted, but it gets derailed. It can get derailed really easily.
But that's really important, because what happens in entrepreneurial, I can never say that word, entrepreneurship. Yeah. And do you know what, sidebar, but so I have this podcast called Fearless Diversity. And my podcast partner said to me the other day, you're like Mrs. Mellenthrop. I've known you 27 years. I've only just realized that you get words mixed up all the time and you get the wrong meanings all the time. And it wasn't until we started presenting together that he was like, wow, you are come across as really dense on occasion. Just like edited out.
I'm with you.
Extreme. And then we have our producer Julian, who's like your lovely producer, he has to like edit all the bits out where I'm Mrs. Mellenthrop. But what I was going to say is what is really important when you are a founder, and just say that the economics are tricky, right? And therefore you have an opportunity over here. And you've got to really wrestle with your integrity. It's very easy for that to be compromised because your values can say, but I've got responsibilities. I've got responsibilities at home. I've got responsibilities to my associates. I've got responsibilities to keep the business going. And it can be very easy then to go, so I'll just say yes to that. And, you know, as I say, maybe it's a live issue for me because I've done it quite recently where I've gone, I'll just say no to that. And actually it probably has, in all honesty, and this is me being completely vulnerable with you now, it's probably set back my plans around scalability this year because I've said no. But honestly, you know, so let's just say in a worst case scenario, it really dented the business, right? I don't think it will, but let's just say that. I would still wake up in the morning and go, that was the right decision to say no to that individual, that contract, that investment, because I could see 3 years down the track it coming back to bite me.
Yeah. And I got that when we did our prep call, and you mentioned, I think you said something like, oh, I haven't quite scaled to this. And we hear that all the time. We are looking at driven, ambitious women because we want impact. So, you know, we're putting it out there. That's who we want to speak to. But the most important conversation that you really need to ground in is like, no, what are you actually standing for and what are you saying no to? Because that, as we know, it's common sense to me that's the otherwise a rocky foundation. But I had to learn that the hard way, where I was revenue driven, thinking revenue will make impact. But I had lost I'd lost the connection to my deeper purpose and my my deeper purpose will happen whether I'm getting paid or not. Like that's what I do in the world, right? Through my volunteering and all my other stuff. It just so happens that I know I can bring that in and commercialize it ethically and have a bigger impact. But it's so important.
And being kind of, that's where the kind of unafraid, and you know, I talked at the beginning about the relationship with risk and psychological safety. And Aliya, I think it was you that mentioned around how do you have psychological safety with yourself, right? You know, so when you are a woman who is looking to lead, sell and scale, then part of the question you're asking yourself is, what is my relationship with risk? Where have I been burnt before? So in all honesty, oh God, I didn't think I was going to go here on this podcast, but in all honesty, you know, I was born in a circus and I lived in a caravan. The house I live in with my husband, and I met my husband at 40 years old, is the first time I've ever lived in a house with a front door. I've only ever lived in a flat. I've lived in a caravan and then in a flat. Now it was a lovely caravan. My mum's flat in Edinburgh, it was my granny's actually, but because we couldn't afford one. But, you know, it was a lovely flat to grow up in. But until I was in my 40s, I never had a front door on the pavement. Yeah. I have a fear of poverty. I have a fear around money that makes my relationship with revenue, with contracts, with bringing in the money more like, I speak to my business mentor and I'll be like, oh, I'm paralyzed with fear. And he'll be like, get a grip, it's absolutely fine. But that is because of my relationship with my history that I am bringing into myself as a business founder today. Yeah. Somebody else will have a very different relationship. But it's until we assess and understand our relationship with risk and then match that with our relationship with being vulnerable. Yeah. So am I prepared to share it, to say it, to ask for help, or am I just going to sit paralyzed and go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing? Mm-hmm. All of those things form that mosaic of the psychological safety with yourself that create that ability to be a good founder of a business. You know, I've got ambitions now, like this, I won't say now mum's dead, and that sounds really flippant. I didn't mean it like that, God bless her. But, you know, now I'm through that kind of grief curve, right? I've come out there, it's taken me a while. There's all kinds of stuff that went on around my mum dying and the stuff that went on around that was really difficult. It's only been in the last kind of year that I've been like, right, I'm coming for you. I'm 48 this year. Mm-hmm. At 55, I'm selling the business. Yeah. That's it. I've got 7 years now. I have got 7 years to make an impact.
I heard that.
Commercial impact.
I heard what you said. I just want you to know. Like I hear the vision. Like I get it. And Yeah, it's just so clear, so profound. And I think that it's like an ignition, isn't it? You're learning, you're piecing, and you're discerning, you're learning the kit. And then it's like on. And that's how it feels for me. I said to Aliya yesterday, and we're going to be starting to wrap up now. We're getting all the signals to wrap up. So I don't want to do it abruptly because I'll feel all weird after the call. I said to Aliya yesterday, it's feeling like I've got bulldozer energy. And I don't like the feeling in my body is my truth. I've loved being much more feminine this last decade and really coming into myself. I'm like, it's bulldozer energy. But actually, it's only shown up in the last month or so. And that's because I'm now surrounded again. Well, I've actually surrounded myself for the first time with strong women, and I'm not afraid. And I'm not doing this with them because that was my upbringing, right? Yeah. So it's so interesting now to then have this. I'm befriending my body, and I'm befriending what my mind is calling bulldozer energy. But it's really like, move out of the way now because I do know what I'm doing, and you do need to listen. I need to be directive. I need to stop asking and deferring and asking for permission. I need to be like, you follow me because I do know what I'm doing. It's really important. Yeah.
Do you know what? I love that. And I'm going to adopt that phrase. And I'm going to say I learned it on this podcast, and I'm going to talk about it because I love that. And this week I said to somebody, and for all my bravado, right, you still get that pit in your stomach where you're going to challenge somebody or say something. And something was said to me in a business context. And I just thought, I don't like, all my hackles went up. And I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I just went, don't speak to me like that. And then I said, do not misinterpret the words I've just said to you.
Yes.
And I was like, right, actually, because the kind of, the bulldozer in me is like, I have got the clarity here and I'm very clear about what I'm saying. I know the point I'm trying to make. Yeah. I know what I want to achieve. I recognize I will have to ebb and flow to get there. I recognize I might have to compromise. That's fine. I'm not too proud to do that. But I won't be squashed in doing that. I'm not going to be bulldozed into doing that. I am the bulldozer. I'm not being flattened by somebody else. Oof. Particularly, by the way, men who think they can tell women how to run businesses, irrespective if they've not done it themselves. That's a whole other podcast.
Did you want to just do like some kind of mic drop with your pen? Because I think you really like there's some kind of fire going on there. Like, definitely.
We hear you, sister.
We have a bit of a special question that we ask every single guest, and we're gonna mosaic up when we get enough of them. So Aliya, I'd love you to ask.
Yeah. So if you wanted to leave a post-it in the ladies' room of a nice hotel for a female founder, what would you write on that post-it for them as your gift to them, and why?
Oh my God. Right. What would I write? So it's going to be, there's a backstory to this. It's just going to be one word, and it's going to be gravitas. And the reason I say gravitas is because I told you I was Women's Officer of the Labour Party when I was 21 years old, right? I didn't have any because I was young. I'd been given this great job. And I was mentored in the House of Lords by these two amazing baronesses. One of them used to work for MI6. Say no more. Yeah. And I used to meet them 12 noon every Monday for lunch. I was not allowed to be late. And what they would talk to me about was gravitas, which is not changing you who you are, but how are you showing up in the way you need to that is appropriate to you in the right context? That's both look, feel, presentation, vocabulary, the whole package. So that would be it for me, gravitas.
I love that. That's amazing. Totally hear you.
So good.
Thank you so much.
Made me cry.
Rachel, thank you. It's been amazing.
I'm so sorry.
It's amazing. Thank you so much.
It was so good. It was so good. Thank you.